6 months ago, if someone told me I'd be sitting in a courtroom watching my former boss squirm while a judge laughed at his legal arguments, I would have called them crazy. My name is Alex, and this is the story of how I went from being a trusted employee to a wrongfully terminated victim to the person who brought down an entire corporate conspiracy. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I'd been working at Meridian Financial Services for 4 years, climbing my way up from junior analyst to senior portfolio manager. I loved my job, loved the clients, and honestly thought I had found my career home. Trevor Patterson, my boss and the company's vice president, had always been supportive of my work. At least, that's what I believed. That morning, I walked into the office like any other day. Coffee in hand, ready to tackle the Henderson account review that had been scheduled for weeks. But instead of my usual routine, I found security guards waiting at my desk. Alex Morrison, one of them asked. Yes, that's me. Is everything okay? You need to come with us. Mr. Patterson wants to see you immediately. The walk to Trevor's office felt like a death march. Other employees stopped their conversations to stare. Some looked confused. Others whispered behind their hands. I had no idea what was happening, but the pit forming in my stomach told me it wasn't good. Trevor's office door was already open when we arrived. He sat behind his mahogany desk, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. His usually warm demeanor was replaced with something cold and calculating. Sit down, Alex, he said without looking up from his computer screen. Why are security guards here? He finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never noticed before. Contempt. We've discovered some irregularities in your work, Alex, specifically with client accounts and confidential information. Irregularities? What kind of irregularities? Trevor slid a folder across his desk. Take a look. Inside were printouts of what appeared to be email communications and account transfers. My name was on some of the documents, but as I read through them, nothing made sense. I don't understand, I said, looking up at him. These show transfers I never authorized, emails I never sent. Trevor, you know me. You know I would never. What I know, he interrupted, is that we have documentation showing you've been sharing confidential client information with outside parties and manipulating account balances for personal gain. My world started spinning. That's impossible. I've never done any of these things. Someone has made a mistake, or... There's no mistake, Alex. We've conducted a thorough investigation. You're terminated immediately for breach of fiduciary duty and violation of client confidentiality agreements.
The security guard stepped forward.
One of them handed me a cardboard box. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal belongings under supervision, Trevor said. Your access to all systems has been revoked, and your final paycheck will reflect the damages we've identified. I stood there, holding that box, feeling like I was in some kind of nightmare. Trevor, please. You've known me for 4 years. You know I would never betray client trust. Something is wrong here. The next few days were a blur of confusion and panic. I called every employment lawyer in the city until I found one who would take my case on contingency. Her name was Patricia Wells, and she had a reputation for taking on corporate bullies. Tell me everything, Patricia said during our first meeting. And I mean everything. Every conversation, every email, every interaction you can remember with Trevor Patterson. I spent 3 hours walking her through my entire employment history at Meridian, how Trevor had hired me personally, how he'd praised my work in performance reviews, how he'd promised me a promotion just 2 months before firing me. Something doesn't add up here, Patricia said, taking notes. The timeline is suspicious. If they really suspected you of these violations, there should have been an investigation period, written warnings, a paper trail. Instead, they went straight to termination with what appears to be fabricated evidence. So you believe me? I believe someone is lying, and it's not you. But we're going to need proof. 2 weeks later, Trevor's next move shocked even Patricia. He didn't just fire me, he sued me. The lawsuit claimed I had caused irreparable damage to Meridian Financial Services and was seeking $500,000 in damages for breach of contract, theft of proprietary information, and defamation of the company. When Patricia called to tell me about the lawsuit, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I couldn't process it any other way. He's suing me for $500,000 for things I didn't do? He's filed for an emergency injunction to prevent you from working in the financial services industry for 5 years. That's when reality hit me. Trevor wasn't just trying to fire me, he was trying to destroy my entire career. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I couldn't find work because word had spread throughout the industry about the lawsuit. My savings dwindled as legal fees mounted. Friends started avoiding my calls, afraid that association with me might damage their own careers. But Patricia never gave up. She spent weeks digging through public records, interviewing former Meridian employees, and building our defense. Then, 3 months after the lawsuit was filed, she called me with news that changed everything. Alex, I need you to sit down for this. What did you find? Do you remember signing up for the company email backup service 2 years ago? The one that automatically archives all employee communications to an external server for compliance purposes.
Vaguely. It was some routine IT security update, right?
Right. Well, it turns out the backup service keeps copies of all emails, even deleted ones, for 7 years, and Trevor apparently forgot about that when he thought he had destroyed all evidence of what really happened. My heart started racing. What are you saying? What are you saying? I'm saying we have access to every email Trevor sent and received for the past 4 years, including the ones he deleted from the company servers. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in a conference room at the backup company's offices going through thousands of emails. What we found was worse than I had ever imagined. Trevor hadn't just fired me on false charges, he had been systematically stealing from client accounts for over 2 years, using sophisticated accounting tricks to hide the theft. When an internal audit was scheduled, he needed a scapegoat. Someone to take the blame for the missing money. That someone was me. The emails showed everything. His communications with offshore shell companies, his instructions to the accounting department to alter records, his detailed plan to frame me for his own crimes. But the most damning email was one he sent to his personal lawyer just days before firing me. The Morrison situation needs to be handled quickly. The audit is in 6 weeks, and he's the only employee with enough access to the accounts to make a credible fall guy. I've already planted the evidence in his system logs. Once we terminate him, we can blame everything on him and close the investigation. Patricia printed out every relevant email. There were hundreds of them, creating an undeniable paper trail of fraud and conspiracy. This isn't just wrongful termination anymore, she said. This is criminal conspiracy, fraud, and deliberate destruction of your reputation. We're not just going to beat his lawsuit, we're going to bury him. The day of the court hearing finally arrived. I sat next to Patricia at the defendant's table, watching Trevor and his team of expensive lawyers file in like they owned the place. Trevor looked confident, even smug. He nodded at colleagues in the gallery like he was attending a social event rather than a legal proceeding. Judge Morrison, no relation, just a coincidence, called the court to order. Trevor's lead attorney, a silver-haired man in a 5,000 suit, stood up to present their case. For an hour, he painted me as a rogue employee who had betrayed client trust and stolen confidential information. He presented the fabricated evidence with theatrical flair, describing me as a wolf in sheep's clothing who had fooled everyone with his fake professionalism. When he finished, Judge Morrison turned to Patricia. Ms. Wells, how does your client respond to these serious allegations? Patricia stood up slowly, holding a thick folder of printouts. Your Honor, my client doesn't just deny these allegations. We can prove they are part of an elaborate fraud perpetrated by Mr. Patterson himself. She walked over to the evidence table and set down the folder. Your Honor, what I'm about to show you is 7 years' worth of email communications that Mr. Patterson believed he had destroyed. Communications that reveal not only his guilt in the crimes he's accusing my client of, but his deliberate conspiracy to frame an innocent man. Trevor's confident expression flickered for the first time. Patricia opened the folder and pulled out the first email. This communication, dated 18 months ago, shows Mr. Patterson instructing offshore shell companies to accept transfers from client accounts. As she read email after email, the courtroom grew quieter and quieter. Trevor's lawyers kept looking at each other with increasing concern. Trevor himself had gone pale, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. But the moment that changed everything was when Patricia read the email about me being the fall guy. Your Honor, this email, sent just 3 days before my client's termination, reads as follows. The Morrison situation needs to be handled quickly. The audit is in 6 weeks, and he's the only employee with enough access to the accounts to make a credible fall guy. Judge Morrison's eyes widened as Patricia continued reading. When she finished, the judge looked directly at Trevor with an expression I can only describe as disgusted amazement. Mr. Patterson, the judge said, are you seriously sitting in my courtroom under oath, accusing this man of crimes that your own emails prove you committed? Trevor's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Morrison held up his hand. I'm not finished. In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant attempt to use the legal system to cover up criminal activity. Mr. Patterson, not only is your lawsuit dismissed, but I'm ordering these proceedings to be immediately forwarded to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. The judge then did something I'll never forget. He actually chuckled. Mr. Morrison, he said, looking at me, you are not only cleared of all allegations, but I suspect you'll be receiving quite a bit of compensation for what you've endured. The gallery erupted. Trevor's wife, who had been sitting in the front row looking smug throughout the hearing, stood up and started screaming at him. Other Meridian employees who had come to support Trevor began whispering frantically among themselves. But Trevor himself just sat there, staring at his hands, as his entire world collapsed around him. Patricia leaned over and whispered, How does it feel to watch justice in action? I couldn't answer. I was too busy trying not to cry with relief. The aftermath moved quickly. The district attorney's office filed criminal charges against Trevor within a week. The FBI opened an investigation into Meridian Financial Services. 3 other executives were arrested as the full scope of the fraud became clear. Trevor pled guilty to 17 counts of fraud and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution to the clients he had stolen from. Meridian Financial Services collapsed within 6 months. The company that had been my dream employer was dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay victims of the fraud. As for me, Patricia filed a counter-lawsuit for wrongful termination, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We settled out of court for an amount I can't disclose, but let's just say I won't need to worry about finding another job for quite some time. More importantly, the financial services industry welcomed me back with open arms once the truth came out. Several firms offered me positions, and I eventually accepted a role as a senior portfolio manager at Harrison & Associates, where I still work today. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Trevor's smug confidence crumble as those emails were read aloud in court. It was seeing justice served for not just me, but for all the clients he had stolen from. It was proving that sometimes, no matter how powerful someone thinks they are, the truth has a way of surfacing. Trevor thought he had covered his tracks perfectly. He thought deleting emails from the company's server would make his crimes disappear. He thought framing me would solve all his problems. What he didn't count on was that backup service automatically archiving every communication. He didn't expect me to fight back. He certainly didn't expect his own words to be used against him in a court of law. The judge's laughter that day wasn't just amusement at Trevor's stupidity. It was the sound of justice being served to someone who thought he was above it. Looking back, I almost feel sorry for Trevor. Almost. He had everything. A successful career, a beautiful family, financial security. But greed made him throw it all away. And when his crimes were discovered, instead of accepting responsibility, he tried to destroy an innocent person to save himself. That's the part I'll never understand. I had been nothing but loyal to him and to Meridian. I had worked late nights, weekends, holidays. I had brought in millions of dollars in new business. And when he needed someone to blame for his own crimes, he chose me without a second thought. But in the end, his betrayal became his own downfall. Those emails didn't just prove my innocence, they revealed the depth of his guilt. Every lie he told, every piece of evidence he fabricated, every attempt to destroy my reputation was documented in his own words. The judge was right to laugh. Trevor's plan was so elaborate, so carefully constructed, and yet so completely undermined by his own arrogance. He kept detailed records of his own crimes while trying to frame someone else for them. I still have nightmares sometimes about that day he fired me. The shock, the confusion, the feeling that everything I had worked for was being stripped away by someone I trusted. But I also remember the moment Patricia read that first email in court, and I saw Trevor's face change from confidence to fear. Justice isn't always swift, and it isn't always certain. But sometimes, if you're lucky and you have a good lawyer who believes in you, the truth finds a way to surface. Sometimes the bad guys really do get what's coming to them, and sometimes, when the judge laughs at their pathetic attempts to escape justice, that laughter is the sweetest sound you'll ever hear. Trevor Patterson thought he could destroy my life to save his own skin. Instead, he handed me the evidence I needed to destroy his. The emails he thought were deleted became the smoking gun that revealed his true character to the world. He's sitting in federal prison now, probably wondering how it all went so wrong. I hope he thinks about those emails every day. I hope he remembers that his own words were what brought him down. Because in the end, that's what this story is really about. Not just workplace betrayal or corporate fraud, but the simple truth that you can't escape the consequences of your own actions forever. Trevor thought he was smart enough to get away with it. He was wrong. The judge's laughter proved that.